Road transport. Air transport. Water transport. And rail transport. A good mix of these modes of transport is necessary for the development of every economy in the world. Ghana's rail sector has not been a strong complement in this transport mix. Since the early 1980s, the railway subsector of the transport industry has suffered. A poorly run network, corruption, inadequate investment into the sector, among others, have gradually screeched the coaches on the track to a disturbing loud halt.
There are young persons resident in Ghana who are yet to take a ride on a train. This is because they were born at a time when not many trains could be seen weaving through communities on these rails. Governments have over the years pledged to revive Ghana's railway sector, but it is yet to return to its lost glory. The Akufo-Addo presidency has also pledged to revive Ghana's railway. Is there hope for the sector?
Ghana's railway in colonial times received the single largest expenditure item in budgets. Railway expenditure accounted for 31.4% of total public expenditure in 1898 to 1931. By 1930, 500 miles of railroad track had been laid in Ghana, and the rail network transported 759,000 tons or 1,518 tons per mile of goods and 1,336,000 passengers or 2,673 passengers per mile. Railway traffic collapsed in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In 1984, railways only transported 500 tons of goods and 2,900 passengers per mile of railroad track. Railways are mostly used to transport manganese and bauxite now, as these commodities are too bulky. Governments preceding independence and post-independence have all had different reasons for wanting to develop a certain aspect of a transportation system. Commuters also have their own ideas. Senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Agyeman, specializes in travel behavior, transport, and land use.
So assuming we have other options for them, what would be the most likely options? And so what I did was to interview some 400 respondents, drawn primarily from 5 of the ministries, and then also largely from the Makola market. And the idea was to ask them what is the reason, the motivation for coming there at the time that I was conducting the survey. And then when they are coming, how do they come? Do they swim? Do they fly? Do they bike? Do they walk? What are the options available to them? And interestingly, one of the key mode of transport, of course, was the paratransit, what we call the trotro in a system. So that was what a lot of people use when they're coming. And they gave reasons for using trotro. So one of which was availability.
But long before the desire of many Ghanaians to fall on passenger buses nicknamed trotro to move around, rail had a place. Operations began in 1899 at the Gold Coast Civil Service with headquarters in Sekindi. It was transferred to Takoradi after the building of the harbour.
This whole development of rail started in 1898. There were different interests. There were some of the colonialists who wanted it to be used to develop mining, and there were some of them who wanted it to be used to develop agriculture. The mining people won, because the governor at the time, who I believe was called McLean, I think so, had just come from Malay, where they used rail to develop tin. So they started from Sekendi in 1898. The chairman, by 1901, they had reached Takwa. By 1902, they had reached Obuasi.
Before Governor Frederick got in Gettysburg, but during his tenure, 1919 to 1927, 28, that was where a lot of investments were done into rail. But the whole idea was to link up the newly constructed port at Takoradi with resource-endowed areas. And so the idea was to link the port with the interior, where you could find the timber or the gold or the other minerals. So that was the whole idea. It was originally meant for the ferrying of goods, essentially.
Ghana's rail infrastructure is classified into three. The Western Line, that has major networks like the Sekendi to Takwa line, Takwa to Hini Valley, Takoradi to Kojo Krom, among others. The Eastern Line includes Accra to Achimota, Achimota to Nsawam, and Koforidua to Tafo. Huni Valley to Achiase, Achiase to Kede form part of a central line. The rail tracks consist of rails, fasteners, railroad ties or sleepers, and the underlying subgrade. The railway system in Ghana had glorious days when it employed many and impacted different aspects of the economy. The decline it suffered post-independence was never reversed, and it only transported 970 tons of goods and 2,900 passengers in 2000, almost 3 times less than before the mid-1970s. Similarly, while railways accounted for more than 70% of cocoa transport until the early 1970s, this share decreased to 1/3 in the 1980s and was 7% in 2000.
Hitherto, railway was running at profit because there was no competition. But then we needed money to rehabilitate the Western Line, at the same time repair some of the broken down coaches and engines.
The rails were built by the colonial masters for their interests, but at the same time it created a boom in cocoa never seen before. It made Ghana, or Gold Coast then, the richest colony in Africa, because they were carrying cocoa on their heads, headbands, on their heads from the bush to the coast, and now they could put cocoa into a moving locomotive. They grew so much cocoa in these areas that what happened was that there was a food shortage in these areas. The farmers stopped growing cash crops, they were growing cocoa. The researchers describe the impact of this on economic development as a persistence of economic development. Over 100 years after the rails have collapsed, the areas along the rail path are more developed than the areas that are not along the rail path.
In the 80s, the railway had a workforce of about 10,000 workers. And though we heard of the good old days, in the 80s too was not so bad, until from 85, 86 that the decline started happening due to lack of investment. You know, in 1983, the former chairman of the PNDC had some rehabilitation with the Indians. So they ensured that at least some minimal intervention into the railway sector happened.
It's now a pale shadow of the past. Tracks in bad shape, coaches non-existent, plus low patronage and investment.
Manganese would have wished that we haul enough for them. I think they had a target of about 6 million last year, but because we don't have the capacity to haul enough, I mean, they reduced it to about 3 million. Even that one, it's a challenge still. But we're doing our best in the times of the challenges that we confront ourselves with. So that is the problem now. Should anything happen to the line that we are working on now, it will be a challenge to pay salaries. So that is the situation. We are all hoping that the revamping that has been promised over the years will come on board so that we are sure that our jobs are secured.
Railway was established in 1903 and they operated up to 2000 when MPP came to power. Then railway began to collapse. And then the express train which went to Kumasi with passengers never returned because the rails had been removed.
They were also eager to put some investment into the railway. You see, it is the lack of it that resulted in them going for that alternative. And even currently, for about a period of about 11 years or 20-something years, we've stopped hauling the bauxite. And what do you want the manganese people to do? They have to use the road. And now we are still having that stiffer opposition with the manganese also. The railway as it is, it needs a heavy investment. And governments after Rawlings have chosen that path of not putting major investment into the railway.
Vehicles therefore naturally become a relatively reliable alternative. These were used to haul goods like timber, gold, cocoa that hitherto were solely moved by rail from mining and farming areas to mainly the ports and harbors.
It became so apparently because the playing field was not even. The playing field was not even in the sense that the Ghana Railway Company suffered. We didn't have much to haul, even what we are expected to haul. Do you see? So, I mean, as a business, you cannot also sit down for bauxite to fold up, for manganese also to fold up. You have to look out for alternative, and the alternative was probably the road. So, in a sense, they were right. But if railway that was actually put there to haul that thing was able to haul it, maybe they wouldn't have done that, because by allowing the road to do it, it was leading to the fast deterioration of the road. You will build a road today that will last for the next 10 years, 20 years. But because of that heavy haulage, within the second year, the road sector was disturbing the road.
I think that also contributed to, because you know, all these facilities are owned by the big men in the society. And I don't believe that if somebody is close to a government and he has bought so many trucks to come and haul all these things or to compete with the railway, he will advise the government to do that. And so we have had in the past the mindset that those people have contributed to our decline, because we see no reason why the railway, looking at its cost advantage and that sort of thing, government over government have not found it necessary to revamp the thing. And so that could be a factor.
This competition, some allege, had government backing, and came as no surprise to them that the sector slowly crashed and became non-existent at some point.
I think the investment in rail, it's a bit higher compared to road. And obviously, because we already had road transport, the infrastructure was already in place. I guess it was a lot easier for governments to, as it were, follow the status quo, as opposed to that ambitious plan of trying to, as it were, diversify and bring other modes, especially in rail.
While cost of rail is generally perceived to be high, it is believed to last longer and has the capacity to withstand pressure of heavy loads, something roads easily deteriorate when subjected to. The pledge to revamp Ghana's rail sector is not new. Governments have, since the inception of the Fourth Republic, have at different points pledged to invest millions, but often exit leaving things worse than they actually found it. Joe Gatti, during his parliamentary vetting as Minister for Railways Development, gave an elaborate analysis of following through with a master plan that will see large cities connected, resulting in an economic boom.
If we believe the research, which I do believe, because there's physical evidence, what will happen in Ghana if we agree to expand the railway is an economic explosion. What we are thinking about the transformation of the economy, can only happen or will happen the fastest if we invest in the railway.
Not all persons who have worked and studied the sector are convinced.
There is a gap between rhetorics and action. It is one thing saying it, and it's another thing making sure that it is done. You see, he is trying, but it is not enough. I like the way he has come to reshape maybe the workshop, the training school, and a whole lot of things. But railway's core business is to run trains, and therefore it must be fixed. The track should be fixed for us to work. The staffs or the workforce that are in railway are also trying to do the work. Had it not been the ingenuity of the workers, the railway as it is wouldn't have stand up to now.
While the colonial architecture focused on haulage of goods, attempts have been made recently to give some attention to passenger coaches as well.
It provides us with the opportunity to do something about it, because obviously people come in, they need to move. We all wake up and somehow the desire to move, it's inbuilt, it is within our DNA. I mean, you wake up and the idea is that, okay, there's something for me to do, so you need to move. Now, when people are moving from all of these areas and they're coming to Accra principally, and estimates suggest that it is here to stay or even get worse in terms of the numbers. So then issues about mobility is paramount. The UN Sustainable Development Goals also actually encourages that. And so I think that now the focus should be more about movement of passengers, because we're going to have a lot of them coming in. Else, congestion would only be, would only worsen by the day.
Government, however, maintains it has made significant strides towards its goal of boosting trade between big cities through rail development.
With the assistance of Public Services Commission, we now have an optimum number of 78, to do a functional, railway service. So have requisite engineers in-house now, and we're able to
by the end of 2020, what will be your biggest achievement?
By the end of 2020, the authority or the sector?
The authority.
The authority. By the end of 2020, I should have had my full complement of staff who will be able to complement the work that is being done by independent consultants at the moment.
I get your point, but the entire sector?
In terms of the entire sector, we would have had the completion of the Tama, Mpakadan line. We would have had the commencement, of the central spine. We would have had the commencement of the eastern line. We would have had the commencement of kilometer 23 on the western line. We would have completed rehabilitation of those lines that require rehabilitation. We would have, as it were, struck ground for the commencement of metro lines in Kumasi and Accra.
The goal remains a line that could move beyond Ghana into other countries.
Now, Ghana-Burkina, as you're well aware, is a line which the President of Ghana and the President of Burkina agreed that they will work together to make sure that we have a line from here to Ouagadougou. Our President said from our coast at Kratemol, from Sekeni Takoradi, Paga. The Burkina Faso President said, don't just get to Paga, get to Ouagadougou. And so we set together a joint committee of experts, co-chaired by the Deputy Minister, Honorable Andy Appiah Kubi, and they worked hard and they meet almost every 2 weeks.
This would, however, come at a great cost. Railways Minister Joe Gatti says investment in excess of 1 billion cedis would still not provide all the lines needed to meet government's plan of reaching Paga.
That we haven't decided on a price per kilometer. We have decided on a price per kilometer. That will be decided after the bill of quantities have been done and the value for money audit has been done. In any case, even though we have decided on a price per kilometer, after the value for money audit, we agreed on a new price. And that price was less than the old price. So these things can happen. And let me also make the point that the price of railway, we are very much aware of our limitations in terms of finance, but the price of a railway the price of our railways are very reasonable. We are taking into account our own circumstances, and we are developing the railway line in a manner that most of the money that we get will be used for the track.
For persons resident in different parts of the country, the desire is simple: to have an effective means of moving around. Long hours spent in moving, poor state of roads and railway lines, rickety cars and coaches with a developing airline means commuters have to face the challenges head-on. Many Ghanaians rely on road transportation to move around. Developments relating to other means of transportation have been relatively slower. Industry players want government to be cautious and slowly build a resilient sector that can survive on its own.
But one good thing I can say that the NPP now has a new face as far as the railway is concerned. Because they got to a time when the railway ministry told us plainly that they could not champion our cause as far as payment of salaries are concerned. This company is 100% owned by the state. And whichever government that is in power is supposed to ensure that workers' welfare are taken on board. And so we had issues with the previous NPP administration. That is not so now. That's not what we are saying. We see the current minister trying all possible best to ensure that the railway company is sustained and the revamping of the railway comes back on track.
One, we should add a human face to it. Let's identify what are the strengths, the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the threats. Who are the likely stakeholders? Can we involve them? By the end of the day, when pushing comes to shoving and the states, the vested part, those who have been given the mandate, they need to put their feet on the ground. I think the research suggests that they should do that. Of course, there will be initial, resistance, but as time goes on and people realize that this is something for the public good, there's something that will work. If you go to Curitiba, Brazil, there was a mayor, one of the city mayor called Jim Lena. He built the city's BRT systems. After a while, he was, kicked out of office. But people agitated for his return. People missed him for the pragmatic solutions to their problems. So we vote for people for solutions. But I guess once you go in there are other considerations and power brokers and vested interests here and there. But I think the rail is something that can really alleviate a lot of the ills that we have in transport systems. And not only that, but also make living a city worthwhile.
In Africa, Kenya is an example. South Africa is also an example. You go there and you see the railway in every nook and cranny of the area. The railway is also a mode of transport for us. We don't understand why government keeps on building roads. And when it comes to the railway, they leave the railway to its management. If you have a board, its minister, and maybe its workers. You see, so that is what I want to see for the railway. And the minister is about doing same. I will congratulate him for everything that he's doing for Ghana Railway Company. But then, it must be swift. It must be swift, or we all risk collapsing this organization of ours.
Governments will change. So will focus and investments in the transportation sector either increase or decline. Only time will tell whether rail will regain its lost glory or perhaps decline further. For now, The few tracks that are used remain the light at the end of a tunnel. How bright will it shine?